I'm going to tell it how it is. The Gophers played like trash in the first half, but they made the comeback. They turned it on, and were they robbed?
You are Locked On Golden Gophers, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Gopher fans? You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Today, we're diving into the biggest takeaways from the Michigan game, giving you a little recap of what happened. Then we're going to talk about 3 things that need to be changed immediately heading into USC week and 3 players we need to step up. But we got to talk about this Gophers game. Were they robbed by the referees? Now, if you came because you saw the banner and you saw that post on Twitter or whatever, look, I don't think they were robbed. Like, the onside kick was unfortunate, but there were other things that went wrong in that onside kick, and they didn't show up in the first half. So if you are tapped in and you are angry and you're a Michigan fan and you're dropping comments like, oh, get over it, or oh, this, that, listen to the show and hear me out, because I don't think we were robbed, but thank you for proving my point. So we're going to dive in today and talk about what happened in this Gophers versus Michigan game. Is it a moral victory? Is it just more pain? What all happened with the Minnesota Golden Gophers? And if you're looking at this game from the first half, the team looked abysmal in the first half. Prior to the final drive, the offensive line was struggling once again, which we have seen for so many games now on this season, which is just baffling to me, because this is supposed to be an offensive line that was a strength of this team. This is an offensive line that had a potential first-round draft pick on the left tackle. This is an offensive line that had 3 players with Senior Bowl interest and Shrine Bowl interest that were getting looks from the pros. On top of that, you have a guy who played as a true freshman, ready to step up and be a starter. And then you had another guy who was a starter last year that was back. He's now been replaced by somebody younger in the lineup, and that dude is still struggling to find his way on this offensive line as well. So the offensive line struggles is the number one problem for this Gophers team, in my opinion, and they need to be addressed ASAP, like yesterday. But the Gophers were really shooting themselves in the foot, and that's not to say Michigan isn't talented. That's not to say Michigan's defense isn't dominant, because it is. But the Gophers were really, really hurting themselves. They had an interception in the first half, which, again, was a wild play. Like, props to that defensive back, but on top of it, tough to fault the quarterback on that one. But it also, apparently, we're in the year of 2024, and we don't have all the camera angles like the NFL does and proves that that technology is there, and we couldn't get an angle to see and make sure that the heel wasn't actually out of bounds on that interception. I mean, I call it a little bit of home cooking when it comes to that, but overall, we're going to move beyond that. So we had an interception there. Then on top of that, the Gophers had a fumble ripped out. Now, you could make some arguments there that the play should have been blown dead because all forward momentum was stopped, and they had been in the scrum for like a good 8 seconds, and they were like, no, let them keep going. And then the ball was ripped out. But the ball was ripped out, plain and simple, and you got to take care of the ball. The ball is programmed. So that's 2 turnovers right there in the first half, and there was a blocked punt. So all of that happened against the Gophers in half number 1. And I believe Minnesota went into the half at halftime 21-3. So you're down 21-3 at halftime, and heading into the half was a big one for Minnesota, in my opinion, because what we've seen from PJ Fleck when we play Michigan, when we play Penn State, when we play Ohio State, is a guy who doesn't really take the big shots or the big risks or go for it on heavy, like, situations when the quarters are closing, when the halves are closing, when you're not doing well in a certain facet of the game. Usually he just plays to lose by the least amount of points as opposed to attacking and trying to win, but not in this game, not at the big house, not with this team. In fact, Max Brosmer was sacked prior to the Hail Mary play, and typically you would see a sack happen like that, putting us in negative yardage, and PJ would maybe run the ball once and then try to take a very deep field goal or something like that. But he let the team go for it, and he let them take a risk, and they threw this Hail Mary shot, and he gets down on the 2-yard line, and then they run out their field goal team to get a field goal to close the half. And now there are some Gopher fans out there that are like, why didn't we just go clock the ball and then try to score a touchdown? That could have been the difference in this game. And although the mentality, yeah, I like where you're at, I like the aggressiveness and what have you, but if you're actually being realistic with what the time looks like, there's two things here at play. First, some were saying, why didn't we go for the touchdown? But we don't have any timeouts left, and the clock is running. Though it stops with a first down, it will start running again. And not only would you have to communicate said play to your entire offense on the field, on the road, at the big house, in one of the most crazy, loud, hectic stadiums out there, and make sure that you're getting that play communicated in transition while running to the ball to get the snap off. You have to do all of that in the crazy madness of the big house without confusion, or even worse, without a penalty. And then that's one reason why you can't go for the touchdown just right off of the cuff. The other one of why not spike the ball and then gather yourself and try to get a touchdown is because you had 2 seconds left and you likely run out of time. Now, maybe if you're lucky and the clock operator is off their game or something like that, then maybe you can land with 1 second left. But again, you're on the road, you got some home cooking going on, and overall, that's not the chance you want to take, because technically you get under center, the clock is going to start. So you get under center, you get 1 second that goes off, you hike the ball and spike the ball. That's another second that goes off. And all of a sudden you're looking up, you had 2 seconds and that clock is reading zeros. So you could have ultimately tried to go for the spike, got nothing. And then all of a sudden you're heading into halftime, wishing you had some momentum, wishing you had some points on the board, but you got robbed by the clock. So it was impressive that Coach Fleck had these special teams on standby, ready to go. And the second that they got that completion, they were out there ready, ball snapped, and got the kick up in time to make it and take some points on the board. So I'm going to give credit where credit is due there. I loved how that at least finished off with some points and some momentum for the Gophers in half one. From there, you transition to the second half, and the second half was a different game. Brosmer was dialed in. Daniel Jackson was making miracle grabs once again. Darius Taylor was creating in the pass game, had 10 receptions in this game. Elijah Spencer has to get love and shouts out. He is constantly finding the holes in the zones. He is constantly finding ways to fight 4 yards. And so Elijah Spencer has really shown up as a wide receiver too for this Gophers team when they desperately needed one. Ethan Robinson forces an interception that really sparked the entire change of the second half for the Gophers. And on top of that, the Minnesota defense got some 3-and-outs that helped get them in the game. Coy Parrish had a massive punt return that helped get the Gophers back into scoring range and eventually getting 2 touchdowns within 2 minutes and 56 seconds. Heck, if this second half Gophers team played the entire game, we're probably talking about a Minnesota upset win. But that's not what happened. And close is not close enough. But that is, and now it's back-to-back games where we're talking about a tale of two halves with this Minnesota Gophers team. So at this point, that needs to be priority one in fixing. You have to be able to go out there and play a full 60 minutes, a full 4 quarters, a full entirety of the game if you want to win any games in this Big Ten season. And you need many more games to get to bowl eligibility, which should be a goal for this team, seeing as this season has started off very poorly and not in favor of the Gophers. So right now, you got to play a full game, plain and simple. That needs to come out in Dinkytown against the USC Trojans. You have to play a full 4 quarters. On top of that, our offensive line has now had 15 penalties accepted on the season across 5 games. I believe there was another penalty that was called on them that wasn't accepted because there were 2 different penalties in the same play. So technically, they've had 16 penalties against them in 5 games. And this offensive line has been a major detriment to the team and is probably the biggest weakness for this Minnesota team right now, which feels absurd because, like I said, this looked to be a strength. With the production returning, with the possibilities of younger players, it looked like, whoa, this could be a dominant offensive line, and that has not been the case. Now, whatever it is, something needs to be figured out against USC because they can be had on the ground game. They're actually a lower rated rush defense right now in the country than Minnesota. They're 78th in the country in rush defense this season, and they haven't quite faced the gauntlet of running backs that Minnesota has against Omarion Hampton, an All-American, against Caleb Johnson, who's second in the entire country in rush yards, against Khalil Mullings, who is top 10 in the country in rush yards and one of the biggest bruising backs out there in the country. So overall, there's hope to run the ball against this USC team. But with the Gophers in a messy first half and missed opportunities and a missed field goal and 2 turnovers and a block punt, and even with all of that, Minnesota had a chance to win the game on the road versus number 12 Michigan with an onside kick try. We saw Minnesota come up with the football, and fans were crazy, going crazy, stoked, everything on the TV and whatnot. Hope ensued. But then there was a penalty on Matt Kingsbury for offsides. And although it was the wrong call, he should not have been called for offsides. There are other things that could have been called against Minnesota on that play, namely that I believe it was Eli Mao blocked early, which technically would have gotten flipped in a review, or could have been flipped, I guess I should say. And so the onside kick play is truly one of the most difficult ones. It was close for Minnesota, but as my papa said when I was growing up, it was close, but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. So you can't hold on to close. You can't hold on to that. We have to move on to the next week, play 4 quarters of football, and try to beat the USC Trojans. So where do we go from here? Minnesota is 2-3 with USC heading to Dinkytown. What does Minnesota have to immediately clean up in hopes for a win? That's what we're diving into coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel, because right now you can start to see the season with a big return over on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check the latest stats, you can view the live play-by-play, and there's so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And on top of that, if you are a new user, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's free money right in your pocket. All you have to do is place a $5 bet, and you're getting $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So definitely go check out FanDuel now. Right now, I'm looking at FanDuel Sportsbook, and I'm looking at the Gophers' upcoming matchup against the USC Trojans here at Huntington Bank Stadium. USC is number 11 in the country, and they're favored against Minnesota by 9.5 points. The line is 9.5. So if you think the Gophers can keep it under 2-score game, well, I guess 9 would be a 2-score game. If you think they can keep it under double-digit deficit, then you should go and have Minnesota cover with your $5. You can go and win that bet and also get $200 in bonus bets. And I think overall, I mean, USC lost to Michigan, I believe, by 3 points. They might have been 4 points, actually. And Minnesota played Michigan close, especially in that second half. So if Minnesota can play 4 quarters, you might be looking at a way Minnesota could try and upset the Trojans, especially because they are not as strong on the ground game, which is what has gashed this defense. But you can do all of that with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook of Locked On. All right, Gophers fans, so let's talk about 3 things we need to improve immediately. Now, the first thing, the number one thing I've already talked about on this show, is you have to play a complete game. There is no more having 1 good quarter, having 1 good half. You have to get out there. Heck, you can't even have just 3 good quarters. Now, 3 good quarters might get you a win against a mediocre or middle tier opponent, but not against the USC, not against a Michigan, not against Iowa, not against Rutgers, who we're going to see later in the season, not against an Illinois who is ranked and we're going to see later in the season. You have to play a full 4 quarters in order to get a dub against some of those schools. Now, the Big Ten is gritty and grimy and slimy, and you know what? Anybody could possibly come out with a big win against a team. There was a point where Wisconsin was beating USC in this last weekend's game. There is a point where USC could have beaten Michigan, but they lost to Michigan. Michigan could have lost to the Gophers. The Big Ten is slimy and grimy, and anybody can win. So the Gophers, in order to try and pull upsets, which is what they're going to need to do if they want to make bowl eligibility, is they have to play a full 4 quarters. No ifs, no ands, no buts. You got to make it happen. So that's priority number 1 that they need to improve immediately. Now, priority number 2 that needs to be improved this weekend is finishing your gosh darn tackles. Now, if this wasn't a family-friendly show, I would have said a couple different words right there, but that is how serious this is starting to be, because the 3 games you have played against Power 4 opponents, you've had 20 missed tackles against UNC, you had 13 missed tackles against Iowa, and 14 missed tackles against Michigan. That's 47 missed tackles in 3 games. That's putrid. That is absurd. That is downright disgusting. And Minnesota's defense has actually held its own for most of the season. They're number 1 in the entire country in pass defense. They are number 5 in total defense in the entire country. They're number 22 in the nation in scoring defense, and they're tied for 8th in the nation in turnovers. But when you look at sacks and pressure created and you look at rush defense, that is where Minnesota is dropping the ball. They're 61st in the nation in rush defense and tied for 81st in the nation in sacks, which is just telling you that the struggles to create pressure are real and stopping the run has been an issue. And we can't stop the run because we can't finish our tackles, because we're diving at people's ankles, because you're trying to armbar tackle them instead of finishing your tackle fundamentals through the hip, see the target and not just leaning head first or diving or reaching or grabbing or what have you. Play through your tackle fundamentals, finish the gosh darn tackles, and hopefully you can start to slow down the run games. This Gophers defense could truly be a top 20 unit in the country, but it all stems from finishing your tackles and the fundamentals on defense. So if you can improve that over the next 3 games, maybe you can get some wins in these next 3 games. I believe the next 3 are USC, UCLA, and then Maryland. If I'm not mistaken, there might be one before Maryland, but regardless, they're games that Minnesota could be in the fight in if they play 4 quarters and if they take care of business when it comes to tackle fundamentals so they can clean up the rush defense issues. If they keep playing as an elite pass defense, they keep playing as an elite scoring defense, keeping the scores lower. If you start to hone in on that rush defense, you could truly be a top 20 defense and really be a team that opponents struggle to score on or move the ball on. And then the third and final thing that the Gophers have to improve immediately in this upcoming weekend is playing to our strengths sooner. Right now, you can't be living in the deep shots, the slow developing opportunities, forcing the ground game if it's not there. You can't do that the entire first half or 3/4 of the first half in hopes that hopefully something will click or hopefully it'll get better or hopefully that shot will work. If you lean into your strengths earlier and quicker, then hopefully some of that other stuff can start to open up. But that's not how the Gophers have really been approaching it, or it's not how it looks like they've been approaching it over these past 5 games. So right now, you have a team that has done really, really well in the quick passing game, especially in the 2-minute and the 4-minute situations and what have you. Overall, Minnesota should aim to get to that quick passing game sooner. Not saying that you have to be in the quick up-tempo passing game the entire game, but at least play into that strength and let the quarterback have that in his hands offensively, and then do it early so he can get into a groove, he can get into a rhythm, he can start dictating things and finding confidence and getting his receivers some touches and getting them created, getting Darius Taylor used in different ways, and then mix that in early and often, and then you can try to capitalize on some run game, and then you can try to take a deep shot because, oh shoot, they went quick game, oh, a big run broke, oh, now they just hit us on a play action because we thought they were going to run it again, but then they didn't, and they hit us down the field. That's where you can start to stem success, but you have to lean into your strengths first. So if that means being up-tempo, which the Gophers have never been with Coach Fleck until this year, but that up-tempo has been a strength of Max Brosmer. That up-tempo has gotten some of the best defenses in the country. Iowa, Michigan, North Carolina has had a solid defense at times, not against James Madison, but at times. So if you have this offensive quick game that has given all those teams problems, why not lean into it, find success with it, and let it open the other facets of your offense, help yourself in getting those other things generated, the run game, the play action passes, the deep, longer developing plays. That can all come if you hit the quick game early and you make a defense react and you get them on their heels and what have you. And then hopefully that will help this team expand what they can do successfully on the offense. So those are the 3 things that I think Minnesota has to fix immediately: playing a complete game, finishing your gosh darn tackles, and then finally playing to our strengths sooner by using the quick passing game, up-tempo speed early on in the game. Now, the final thing we're going to talk about on today's show is the 3 Gophers players, technically there's 4 in this one, that we need to step up immediately this upcoming weekend in order to be able to win this game. That's what's coming up next. All right, Gophers fans, before we get to our next topic, I got to talk to you about our friends over at Gametime, because Gametime is the place to be when you're trying to find tickets for yourself and you're looking for the best options possible. When you're looking for the best deals, the best last minute tickets you can find on the market, you're going to find them over at Gametime. And Gametime has the lowest price guarantee. And if you find tickets that are the same type of tickets elsewhere, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference with their lowest price guarantee. On top of that, you have some of the best ticket coverage in the game. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy, including job loss protection and what have you, so you can feel comfortable getting excited for your next event. So if you're looking to get to this Gophers versus USC game at Huntington Bank Stadium, you're definitely going to want to go check out Gametime. You can even toggle the all-in pricing feature. Make sure you toggle it so you can see that all-in pricing, so you don't have any surprise fees at checkout when you're going. But if you go on to this Gametime app and you take a look, they have been using Gametime Picks, which makes getting tickets easier for your favorite live events even easier, because it filters out the fluff and it shows you only the incredible deals and great seats that you don't have to waste time searching through the thousands of tickets that they have. And on top of that, you can even get the panoramic seat view, so you can see what your seat view is going to look like before you get to the stadium. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the Gametime app, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege, that's LOCKEDON college, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, Gophers fans, we're wrapping this one up with 3 Gophers we need to step up in this upcoming week, and we need it badly. We need it ASAP. We need it yesterday. The first one is actually 2. We're going to dive into this offensive line, and the people that I think need to step up the most is Quinn Carroll and Tyler Cooper. Now, some people might be like, whoa. Greg Johnson had like multiple false starts as a center last week, and I'm with you. You don't like to see that. That's tough. But Greg Johnson is a true sophomore who has never played the center position before, who has gotten into it through the spring and the fall, and that's where the Gophers have him right now. And he's in his first year as a starter and his first year ever as a center. Whereas Quinn Carroll and Tyler Cooper are seniors in their last year of eligibility. They were on Senior Bowl watch list, Shrine Bowl watch list, you name it. And yet they are having some issues left, right, and the third in this Gophers season. So our 2 offensive linemen who are in their final years of eligibility in this last game against Michigan gave up a combined 12 pressures allowed on the quarterback. That included 9 hurries and 3 sacks versus Michigan from our senior leaders on the O-line. You absolutely need more from your seniors compared to Greg Johnson, who had 4 pressures given up, 3 of them were hurries and 1 quarterback hit, no sacks though. And again, is a true sophomore in a new position and a first-time starter. So there's going to be ups and downs with him at time. But your seniors are the ones that you're hoping can kind of hold the fort, maintain the foundation, and help that youngster through his first learning errors as a true starter, as a true center for the first time. So Quinn Carroll, Tyler Cooper, those are the guys you're hoping can help really support him along the way. But if they're struggling as well and giving up 12 pressures and 3 total sacks in a game, it's tough. And that's why those 2 need to step up for us and the Gophers team heading into USC's week. I think they're going to be a big-time players and big-time reason we maybe can run the ball against USC in this upcoming week. Now, the next player that we need to step up for the Gophers in week 6 for the Gophers is Maverick Baranowski. Now, he might be the team leader in total tackles on the season, and good on him. I'm happy that's happening. He was a guy heading into the season. I said, I think he's going to have a huge year. I think he's going to have a step in the right direction. I think he's going to have massive confidence, and he's showing. He leads the team in tackles. He's had some really good pressures. He's had some really good moments. But in that game against Michigan, he had 3 missed tackles in that game by himself and had a very horrible pass coverage grade of a 43.2. He allowed 2 receptions on 3 targets for 27 yards and a touchdown. So we need a get-right game. We need Maverick Baranowski to be back at his best because we're playing a much better passing team in USC and the Fighting Trojans with Miller Moss, who can put a ball on a dime, which means if he sees a linebacker struggling in pass coverage, you can bet he's going to take a shot, take a risk, take a stab at that linebacker. So we need Maverick Baranowski to clean it up in the coverage grade, but also to clean up the missed tackles along with all of his teammates who had far too many last week. Now, the final player that we need to step up in this upcoming matchup against USC is Jack Henderson. Now, he played the lowest amount of snaps in that Michigan game on the season, and he also had one of his worst games by far on the season. He graded out at a 53.8. He had a missed tackle. He just wasn't much of a factor for the Gophers. And this is a guy who has multiple sacks on the season. He has a pick 6 on the season. He has a forced fumble, I believe, on the season. Jack Henderson has been a dude for this Gophers defense, plain and simple. One of the best players on the defensive side of ball for Minnesota. So I think he just had an off game. I think he had a game where he didn't get a lot of opportunities, and that's going to change against USC, who is going to be a pass heavy team, who's going to want to look to attack. I think he's going to be important in the blitz game. I think he's going to be important in the coverage game. I think Jack Henderson can have a bounce back game, and I believe in him probably more than most people on this Gophers team, and we're going to need him at his best. So I believe in Jack Henderson, but we need him to step up in this next one, and that's going to do it for us here at Locked On Golden Gophers. I appreciate you listening. Be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube. Tell others about the show. Hopefully, we're talking about an upset victory against USC, and we will move forward from here. Stop talking about being robbed on the onside kick because we are not Iowa fans, and we're not going to fester on something like this for the entire season, for other sporting events, and what have you. So we're going to move on. We're heading on to USC week, and we're going to dive into more of their team, the weaknesses, the strengths, the players, and what have you on tomorrow's show. I'll see you then. Row the boat, Sky Michael Gophers, as always, and please don't forget to hit subscribe.